And then they have clear criteria for feedback. To my way of thinking, by the way, creating these cognitive apprenticeship frameworks is one of the hardest things I do intellectually. It's very difficult to think these out, and it's not something I do casually or change every semester. Once I have spent time investing in this, then I can feel confident I'll teach to this. But these are not easy to create. The faculty then close the loop. They have made changes in their curriculum, they've made changes in their clinical practicum, because they read those portfolios, they interact with the students, and they are continually improving their program. They now virtually never have a moment of ill ease at that second year. It wasn't that the students weren't capable, it's they hadn't provided sufficient scaffolding for a high level of professional quality. So they demonstrated improvement in integrative learning. And this is a good model of a whole program that undertook the same analysis, treated as inquiry, but we're doing it in a shared way, not just as individual teachers. I want to talk about ethics. Came up quite a bit yesterday, at least in my discussion group, possibly larger. And so this was a program that a bunch of us put together for teaching ethics in science and engineering. Why science and engineering? I know it's shocking, but it turns out there's been a lot of fabricated data in the science world the last decade or so. And so there's a big push in the United States to make sure everybody understands that. Plus, within engineering, there are constant ethical decisions you make when you design something. There are decisions you make that could cost more, but may help people more, and making those decisions often involves ethics. This picture is a professor, Richard DeGeorge, who's a philosophy professor and a young engineering professor. And so this was collaborative work where we ran a seminar in ethics and the teaching of ethics taught by the philosophy professor. And the engineering and science professors then took that work, and many of them embedded it into their course. So I'm teaching a course in hydroengineering. I get to a certain point. There's a design problem. I get the students to analyze that problem as an ethical question. It's not something abstract. It's embedded in what they actually are interested in. Because we had funding from the National Science Foundation, we also ran some control courses, including a standalone ethics course taught by Professor DeGeorge. It was just nothing but learning about ethics from the source. We used 3 measurement systems. Here again, the philosophy and business faculty members set the curriculum. The standalone courses, there are actually 3 of them, one taught by a chemist, one by an engineer, and then the biggest one by the philosopher. The embedded ones included all of those fields: chemistry, physics, engineering, and so on. Very wide range. We had exam questions and papers to assess understanding by the professor. There was a vignette-based standardized instrument to assess thinking, critical thinking. Given this situation, how would you handle it ethically? And then we had our own rubric that we used to look at the student work. So the instructor graded it for course purposes. We then had graduate students who were highly reliable reread that work and evaluate its quality for ethical thinking. I need a big sign that says, rubrics are us. Okay? One of the key things that has, I think, transformed a lot of teaching is, as people want to make sure that we are giving students rich and authentic assignments, we have to think very deeply about how we give feedback on that and how we evaluate it. So many, many people are spending time unpacking the intellectual content in what they teach and figuring out, for different categories of skill, what are low, average, and high quality responses, and articulating that. There is, by the way, a lively debate about when in the process you should show this to the students. Do you show it to them before they start? Do you show it to them once they've started? Do you only show it to them after you've graded it? Good argument to have, but beyond the immediate case. So some of the categories: gather the facts, define the ethical issues, identify who is affected, identify the consequences of each action. There were actually 2 other categories we scored. One was if the course gave no opportunity to the student to show that, and the other was if there was an opportunity but they showed nothing. They just ignored it. Here are the others. Consider your character and integrity. Think creatively about actions. Check your gut. I like that one. It's the sort of, if it doesn't feel right, it can't really be ethical, something like that. And decide on the proper ethical action and deal with opposing arguments. This rubric was developed from the seminar that the professors taught, the philosopher and the business ethics specialist. Now, I wanted to show you some examples of data to make a larger point. So there will not be a quiz on which one had the biggest shift in the distribution. The histogram, the bar with the little tick mark below it is the low quality. The two to the left are either there was no opportunity to demonstrate it or the student demonstrated no understanding at all. The bottom sets are the standalone ethics courses taught by the philosophy professor or the one engineering professor. The top are the scores from the students who were in the embedded courses. So they might have had only 2 or 3 days worth of ethics in their whole course. And as you can see, in these four, the consequences, duties, character, and actions, in each case, the distribution of the performance was higher. There were more people at the medium and the high level of quality when they were studying it in the context of what they were actually interested in than when they took it as simply the philosophy of ethics. So if you can see that comparison in those four. And if we look at the whole of the thing, all 9 of the characteristics, in all 9 cases, not 2, not all 9 cases, there were better performances on ethical thinking in what the students wrote when they studied it in the context of their own field than when they studied it in the presence of a great philosopher. This is counterintuitive outcome. Our philosophy colleague was disturbed. He questioned the validity of our rubric till we told him it was his rubric. We didn't make this up. We just wrote down what you said. I think it's an important point that overall there was better performance when there was a case analysis than it was abstract principles. It was overall when the analysis was situated in a field the students knew. Multiple cases produced better learning than a single presentation of principles, and multiple cases produced deeper understanding than a full semester of standalone philosophy instruction. To me, this is a very, very profound finding. It went against a lot of things. 10 years ago when I first that's more than 10 now, 15 years ago, first went down this path away from my research interests and into studying teaching as my scholarly area, I wouldn't have believed this. I was teaching theory and I was teaching conceptual issues and I had students writing brilliant essays on conceptual analysis. But then I followed a sort of a dare from a guy I met at Carnegie, and I turned all of my exams into word problems, a vignette, then use what you know in this vignette. Grades went down 2 whole grade levels. Students who could mimic my conceptual language could not use those ideas in solving a, to me, simple problem. So I think this is a key finding. If we're interested in breadth, if we're interested in transformation, you don't sit down and give people a course in transformation. Our university is currently revising its general education. This is a page from the website showing that in the first couple years we'll talk about critical thinking, communication, breadth of knowledge. Do you know the stuff in your field? And then more advanced would be things like culture and diversity, social responsibility and ethics, and integration and creativity. These are the things we think will develop in the 3rd and the 4th years. Obviously, we'd like to think they develop as those shaded bars suggest throughout their time. But our business model does have more than one professor teaching 400 students with exams that say, who was buried in Grant's tomb. Here's an example from that. This is the integrative knowledge. And for all of those, the committee, this is a faculty committee, it took 2 years for them to develop all this work. 2 contentious years. If you've been around faculty, nothing gets people more exercised than wordsmithing a document about learning goals. For each one, there are core goals and then learning outcomes. So demonstrate awareness and comprehension of how different areas within or across disciplines explain a question. Analyze and combine information. think, react, and work in imaginative ways that produce innovative expressions. This is the sort of transformational goal I think many of us have. For ethical behavior, develop and apply a combination of knowledge and skills to understand responsibility, like with the service learning, and what does it mean to act on this understanding of responsibility and ethical behavior to serve a community. These committees, I'll spare you, have developed cognitive apprenticeship rubrics for all of these 6 goals. Again, many, many, many hours of faculty time doing the difficult work of saying what do we mean by the development of each of these skills, and each one has components. It's a very ambitious step because it's the first time we as an entire campus are saying a bachelor's degree from the University of Kansas will include these 6 skills, 6 areas. Before that, it was up to individual schools and colleges. Now, in some sense, this is like what everybody else is doing. It's just general education talk. But here's what's different. In most cases, once you get certified, your syllabus presents material in the area listed in the criterion, you're done. Okay, the course counts. And then nobody ever looks at it again. In this case, the instructor, in applying to be considered part of the new core, has to show examples of assignments that will give the students an opportunity to demonstrate the listed skill. And then, after 3 years, your course comes up for renewal. It's not, once you're in, you can have it forever. Every 3 years, you have to bring forward evidence from that group of students showing that they are, in fact, performing the skill at a level that meets the criteria of the committee. This is radical. I'm astounded that it has gotten as far as it has through faculty governance. We have a provost right now who takes no prisoners. He was very, very smart, however, in that he's not doing any of this work himself. He found the 2 or 3 opinion-leading faculty members who had opposed the last attempt at this and appointed them in charge of it. And so they have shepherded this through endless committees. To me, the biggest thing in it is that to stay as part of the general education list of courses, you must demonstrate that students are showing those skills in assignments from your class. It's a remarkable thing. There are 2 challenges I want to mention, just if you've considered what this would look like in your own context. We've recently instituted first-year seminars, which are integrative, interdisciplinary, small seminar experiences to engage students. The faculty bodies that approve courses oppose those courses tooth and nail because they weren't discipline-specific, content-driven courses. And so it was a very painful, although ultimately successful experience for those courses to get approved to be part of the curriculum. So as I said, these ideas are by no means universal at the University of Kansas, but they were approved. We have a Center for Sustainability. It's one of our university's research priorities. We have just done strategic planning to beat the band, and one of our 4 main strategic priorities is sustainability for research. That Center for Sustainability has been unable to find an academic home for an integrative, multidisciplinary course on sustainability. So if you go to the website, you'll see sustainability, big KU priority, but they can't get a course approved to teach it. Why? Well, there isn't enough physics in it for us to give physics credit, and there isn't enough geology, and whatever. So what I've tried to do is lay out with a bunch of examples that there's different kinds of learning: engaged learning, integrative learning, collaborative learning. It could happen in a course, a program, across the whole curriculum. These are the ways in which we can fill stuff in. Please note that we are not very good, or at least in our place yet, on collaboration. And collaboration is mentioned nowhere in the new KU core. This is a screenshot from part of our center website. The URL is there. Andrea's portfolio is in the top one. Danny and Kim are in the community engaged section. Speech, language, and hearing is there, and the ethics education is not the big picture, the report that I showed you, but the individual courses that were part of it. Now, I have mentioned almost nothing about technology, but as Anna kindly reported in her introduction, most of my own research is on the use of technology in my own teaching. I think the key point, and this is one that several of us around NUS were talking about at lunch the other day, is what's the right relationship between educational goals and technology? And our view is the educational goals and the best practices in learning should drive things, and technology is in service of that. And too often, technology drives the conversation. I think MOOCs are a perfect example of that. In the US, there has been this dramatic shift of attention from the press and money from foundations to support MOOCs. But a year and a half ago, there was a book published, I don't know if it reached outside North America, called Academically Adrift, in which two educational researchers demonstrated using a standardized measure of intellectual growth that fully a third of college graduates in a sample of many thousands across 22 institutions showed no improvement in their intellectual skills over 4 years of college, 0. And a half improved only slightly. Where is that attention when it comes to the MOOCs? Why aren't people who are saying, well, we had 160,000 people, 14,000 finished, and they took a multiple choice test, and we think that they learned, as was pointed out yesterday, that they learned more than the Stanford students who took the same course with the same MOOC. The stuff that we're talking about that really if you want transformed people, it won't come from answering multiple choice tests. How many times a day do you ever have a multiple choice life other than an ATM? Okay? That's not what makes a transformed person in the 21st century. You have to be a critical reader of multiple sources. You have to be able to synthesize. You have to be able to recognize problems that are new to you. They look strange, but they have something underneath them you do understand. You're not going to get that with something that's limited to multiple choice responding. There is a place for all this wonderful material online, but we have to remember it will not replace what can only be done in a richer or open-ended environment. And so we were talking yesterday about what's the future of the research university. I think the future is that we can take full advantage of the material that's out there to provide our students with information. We can take full advantage of technology to have them learn things that we want them to learn outside of class and come to class ready for a meaningful interaction and problem solving. But then what we do best is lead them in that face-to-face, in groups, in individual ways, so that we are using technology to aid what we can offer best, to really transform them. Now, I plead guilty to having taken Huan Hong literally in her invitation letter. I thought it said, please provide 2 or 3 challenges. And I know in your groups you will discuss whatever on earth you want. But I did follow the instructions. Maybe I'm part Asian. I did very well in school. And so I created these 3 challenges just to prime your conversation. You can take them or leave them. To me, the creation of assignments is an incredibly important part of what we do in teaching. It's really hard to write a good, non-trivial, complicated problem that students can work on that is soluble given what they know, but is not obvious and is not simply repetition. And so creating those examples at the level of a course, at the level of a program, at the level of a curriculum, how do we know they are really transformed intellectually? Another Jayhawk. This is my favorite Jayhawk. It has attitude. I mean, it's kind of jaunty, in your face, and it's actually a beautiful bronze. The feather work is remarkable. So, I had a colleague at Nebraska who made this statement: on a test, I never ask anything I taught in class. Now, you could take that 2 ways. Brian was either an incredible smartass, or, and what he meant, I believe, was that I don't want the students to repeat back to me what I taught. The challenge is to provide them with something that looks new, but is in fact an instantiation of what they should have learned. And so one of the challenges in assignments is frequently professors ask for rote knowledge and less frequently ask for a critical evaluation, especially in the first and second year of the curriculum. We blame our business model. With 800 students, I can't possibly ask an interesting question. In fact, you can, but you won't ask as many of them. And then there's the whole notion of intellectual development. It was hinted at yesterday. Somebody was talking about Baxter Magolda. Her work derives from the work of a psychologist named William Perry, who talked about the development of a sort of an epistemological sophistication, from believing that authorities give you the right answer all the way up to being able to critically evaluate evidence. Well, that's what I want my students to do, because if they're voting in an election, they need to look at the evidence provided by all the people about what programs they would or wouldn't support and make their own decision. Not vote this way because Bruce Springsteen is. What kind of learning activities do we need to have? What will it take for these performances to transfer or generalize? I like this. This is sort of the way we usually think of teaching. The grown-up bird pre-digests knowledge and hands it to the little ones who are grateful. The kind of work that Andrea Greenhoot did demonstrates that critical thinking, synthesis, is not a natural property of human thought. It requires skill. It doesn't just magically pop out when you hit 18. You have to assign things that are high level, give students lots of practice and feedback, engage in active and inductive learning, and there has to be multiple exposures, both within a course and across a whole program. Colleagues have to together say, we will, across all of our courses, include these critical, difficult kinds of questions. And then collectively look at the data to ask, how are we doing as a program? And then sort of last, and this perhaps addresses many of you in the room, as academic leaders, what kind of leadership does it take to get your faculty to do this? That was a large part of our conversation in the group formerly known as RED, now to be dispersed to the winds. Okay. All right. How do you get people to do this? What can academic leaders do to make it so that their campus, faculty members will say, yes, I will give time away from something else. Nobody's sitting around doing nothing. To engage this at this level, to really make a transformative course for some of my students. Are our current models of leadership optimal? I think program level ownership is a key feature. Campus-wide curricular redesign, and by heft I mean you got to put some weight behind it. Like if you want to stay in the KU core, show me your students are actually doing what you claimed. That's just amazing. I can't wait till that first wave of renewals comes. Regular faculty members need to be involved in this work. If you just pass it off and say, okay, adjuncts and lecturers and part-timers will do this, and our real faculty will do something else, that communicates a powerful message. And then honoring these activities throughout the institution with the symbolic things like publicity, awards, standing, fancy professorships, and then with the other rewards, including promotion, tenure, and salary. So that's a view of part of our campus in lovely Lawrence, Kansas. I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to talk about examples, questions, comments.
Well, welcome everyone to the afternoon session. It's my very great pleasure to now introduce Professor Amy Tew, who I think you probably all know. I keep finding Amy's name mentioned all around the world. She really is an international expert and highly regarded and well known in the area of teaching and learning and curriculum reform. As you probably know, Amy is Pro-Vice-Chancellor and Vice President Teaching and Learning at the University of Hong Kong, where she has overseen the most extraordinary amount of change, and about which we're going to hear this afternoon. Amy is in her own right an outstanding researcher in education, so I'm sure those are qualities and experience that have stood Amy in good stead for what she's about to tell us. Amy, welcome.
Okay, well, thank you very much. What I'll do is, if I'm not talking as normal, will you please forgive me, because I have a bit of a management problem with my mouth ulcer. That's why, it might sound a bit funny to you. Anyhow, what I'm going to talk about, it's not the whole of the curriculum reform. As some of you know, Hong Kong has undergone a major change in its curriculum, in its educational structure. Secondary schools have changed from 7 years to 6 years, and all universities are now offering 4-year degrees. And this is the first year we have a double cohort, which is we're taking in graduates from Form 6, Secondary 6, as well as Secondary 7. And we are now like 1.5 months into the double cohort, okay? And we had this crisis management team, which we've been meeting for the whole year, and so far no crisis yet. But we cannot sit back and relax, because crises often happen when you least expect it. We always bear that in mind. So what I'm